Spirit Airlines shuts down. Leaders point the finger of blame. The Supreme Court reverses a lower court ruling restoring access to an abortion pill. Not all the stars will be at tonight's Met Gala. Calls for a boycott of the event's host, Jeff Bezos. Hello, everyone. I'm Weijia Jiang in for Major Garrett. Welcome to the Takeout. Spirit Airlines is now out of business. Thousands of travelers spent the weekend stranded when the airlines pulled the plug at 3 in the morning on Saturday. More than 17,000 employees find themselves out of work. In court filings today, Spirit said, quote, recent geopolitical events resulted in a massive and sustained increase in fuel prices. That is an obvious reference to the war in Iran. Since the start of the war, Brent crude has spiked 55% from $72 in late February to its peak at $126 per barrel. Gas prices are up nearly 50% to $4.44 per gallon on average. And as with most things, the blame for Spirit has turned political. Democrats blaming President Trump's war with Iran. Members of Trump's cabinet are blaming the Biden administration for the airline's demise. We begin our coverage with senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve at Newark Liberty International Airport. Chris, it's great to see you. I know you've been covering this now for quite a while. Can you walk us through how travelers are navigating Spirit's closure?
Well, basically, if you were a Spirit flyer with a reservation to travel, you are in the process of getting a refund. Spirit says the majority of those to credit card and debit holders have already been processed and should be going back to their cards. If you were mid-trip, well, you were stuck, basically, because Spirit planes like the one behind us here, they're not going anywhere. They are parked for the foreseeable future. So those people, and it's about 94,000 so far, have basically rebooked on other airlines to get home. We're learning from the Department of Transportation, tens of thousands left sort of in the lurch that had to take advantage of other airlines offering what they called rescue fares to get people home.
And Chris, there was an attempt over the weekend that ultimately failed for the federal government to try to bail out Spirit. Can you remind us what happened and how things unfolded so quickly into its demise?
Sure. So we learned in these new court filings that the Spirit Airlines team learned that this attempted lifeline was off the table last Thursday, which is earlier than first thought. But the federal government, at President Trump's recommendation, had looked at a $500 million aid package to essentially give Spirit some more financial runway. Ultimately, that deal didn't come together, and without that deal, Spirit ran out of available cash. You know, they also said in these court filings that between March 1st and the end of April, they spent an extra $100 million just on jet fuel. For a cash-strapped airline trying to get out of bankruptcy, that was more than they could afford.
And Chris, it's obviously not just customers impacted. We're talking about thousands of Spirit employees. What happens to them next?
Well, they are out of a job. It's thousands of direct Spirit employees and then thousands more contractors and people who had jobs supplying or working around Spirit Airlines that now have to find other work. You know, we've talked to one flight attendant who said he teaches dance classes on the side. He's going to try to do more of that. We talked to another who said she just hopes to get another flight attendant job. Other airlines have said they're going to give priority to Spirit employees, pilots and flight attendants, people that are already trained to do those jobs will get special consideration. We're hearing some airlines are going to do hiring events in cities that were crew bases for Spirit. But right now, they're trying to figure out what's next. They'll obviously be able to get unemployment. Spirit will process a final payroll. But, you know, as one of them told us, he's not sure what's going to happen, how he's going to pay bills when the check stops coming as soon as this next pay period.
And our thoughts are with all of those employees. Thank you so much, Chris Van Cleve. CBS News travel editor Peter Greenberg joins me now. Peter, thanks for making time for us. Obviously, Spirit alluded to the war in Iran, but other airline companies are facing the same figures in terms of crude oil. So how much do you think this was due to the war in Iran?
Well, let's go back in time. Spirit has lost $2.5 billion since 2020. Now, they were called an ultra low cost carrier, a ULCC, but there was really nothing ultra low cost about it or Frontier or Allegiant or Avelo. They had to pay fuel at the same prices, their equipment costs, their labor costs, their other goods and services they had to contract for. Their only competitive advantage in the marketplace for consumers was offering low airfares. But if the low airfares can't pay those bills, it doesn't take a math genius to figure out they have no cash. And that's really what happened. The other airlines, of course, tried to line up behind Spirit and ask the government for a $2.5 billion bailout. That's no longer on the table. And the reason why the other deal fell apart is because Spirit was already operating under Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They had no assets to pawn. JetBlue was facing a bankruptcy filing. What did they do? They pledged 22 of their planes as collateral to get a $500 million loan to avoid the bankruptcy filing and then continue to fly for 2026. Spirit didn't have that option. They don't own any of their planes. They released. They had no other options.
And is that your assessment of why the federal bailout effort stalled and ultimately failed?
No, what really happened was that when the federal government said, okay, we're going to buy stock warrants in Spirit because there was no collateralized equipment, they also said they wanted to be in first position to get paid back. The other creditors said, wait a second, we're the creditors here. We're not going to accept that. And then the deal fell apart.
And Peter, obviously, consumers are getting ready to travel this summer. We anticipate prices will go up again. What should people expect now that they have watched one airline completely, fail as a result of these rising prices?
Well, even without the Spirit failure, international airfares are up 37% from just 2 months ago. Domestic airfares are up about 20%. To give you an example, Spirit also flew some international routes. Last week, a ticket on Spirit from New York to Colombia was $700. So was Americans. Today, Americans' airfare is $1,200. That'll give you an idea of where we are right now.
And I know you're not, you can't predict the future, but given the trends, given what we are seeing, what should people anticipate as they book their travel this summer?
That the other low-fare carriers are going to be in the same boat, assuming the prices stay the same as Spirit. You're going to see either mergers, consolidations, or some failures outright. As with Spirit, most people buy their tickets with credit cards, so you are protected under federal credit law to get your money back if the flight doesn't operate. That doesn't get you where you want to go, but at least you have some consolation with that.
All right, Peter. I know you'll be tracking what's to come, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it.
A search and rescue operation is underway in southern Morocco for 2 U.S. service members who were reported missing during annual training exercises. CBS's Eleanor Watson, who has been following the latest developments, joins me now. Ellie, what more do we know about these 2 service members?
The search and rescue operations are ongoing for 2 U.S. Army soldiers who defense officials say were last seen near the ocean cliffs around the training area in southwest Morocco. The initial reports, as told to our team on the ground there in Morocco covering this exercise, defense officials tell our team that initial reports indicate that a big group of soldiers, after training ended on Saturday, went for a hike to maybe see the sunset. When one soldier fell off the cliff, a second soldier jumped in to save the first. Now those 2 soldiers are presumed missing. Search and rescue operations are ongoing. The operations include U.S. Armed Forces as well as the Moroccan Armed Forces and other countries also participating in the exercises.
And what do we know about these annual training exercises? Are they halted for now? How often do they occur? How many people are we talking about that participate?
This exercise is African Lion, which is the largest annual training exercises for U.S. forces in Africa. This year, it's hosted across 4 countries, around 7,000 personnel participating from 30 different countries. This year focused heavily on autonomous systems, and we're told by defense officials that some of those drones have been diverted, as well as some military vessels have been diverted to help with this search and rescue operation. But the rest of the training has been minimally disrupted and will continue for the 4 remaining days of the exercise.
All right, Eleanor Watson, thank you so much. The U.S. military is working to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command confirmed today that American forces destroyed 7 small Iranian boats that attempted to interfere. CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain joins us now. He also hosts the School of War podcast and, of course, offers a wealth of knowledge about the Strait, about exactly what's going on. Aaron, today we saw Iran also attack other ships. So walk us through the very latest about what is happening in that waterway.
Sure. It's been a very busy day in the Strait of Hormuz, which, just to remind people, is the single point of access into the Persian Gulf through which 20% of global oil traffic, 10% of all maritime commercial traffic travels. And the situation up until last night was Iran effectively had it closed. It had intimated that this central traffic separation scheme, these white lanes here are the lanes through which ships are supposed to go, was mined. It had encouraged ships to coordinate with the Iranian government to go through Iranian territorial waters. What President Trump and then Central Command essentially said last night was, we are going to open another channel here in the south through Omani waters, and we will, quote unquote, guide, not escort. So there's kind of an explicit rejection of convoy operations, but we will guide ships through this southern passage. And we learned as we woke up this morning that 2 American ships that had been trapped in the Strait, trapped in the Gulf, actually had made it out, while American missile destroyers, guided missile destroyers, had made it into the Gulf, at which point the Iranians retaliated pretty dramatically, striking targets in the UAE, striking a South Korean ship at anchor here off the coast of the UAE, and otherwise causing a fair amount of mayhem as we then, the U.S. Navy, sunk 7 of their boats.
And as we monitor this in the coming days, obviously you just mentioned President Trump's announcement of this initiative called Project Freedom, but I wonder what additional threats that we should be watching for as, these U.S. ships try to not escort, but guide these other ships through. Yeah,
well, first, I'm curious to know what the difference between guiding and escorting means. But just to zoom out to address your question here, just to state an obvious point, the Strait of Hormuz here in the middle of the map, all of this, everything up here is Iran. That is the Iranian coast, out of which can emerge these small boats. They could have machine guns mounted on them. They can carry mines. They can carry rockets and other things like that. Iran also retains a store of ballistic and cruise missiles, some of which it shot at the United Arab Emirates today. There's a fair amount of firepower left on the Iranian side that can certainly mess with commercial shipping. You have to balance against that. The U.S. naval assets and Marine Corps assets that have been in the region manning this blockade are now being deployed forward into the area of the Strait. We just learned it was an unspecified number of ships that went in overnight, are in the vicinity of the Strait. If I'm a small Iranian boat looking to harass shipping, I got a machine gun. Sure, I can cause a bad day for the commercial sailors on that ship. I wouldn't mess with a guided missile destroyer with a small Iranian craft. So there are assets on both sides of this.
And obviously, the president still wants to find some sort of diplomatic off-ramp. Can you bring us up to date about the latest peace proposal on the table that the president has said he would have to have the final word on?
Well, what seems to be holding up negotiations right now, based on what we can tell, is that so far the Iranians have only been willing to discuss essentially a trading of the end of the American blockade on Iranian ports and their own closure of the Strait of Hormuz, this sort of dueling blockade situation, and they want to punt on the other issues. They want to punt on the nuclear issue, for example, for later discussions. That's not been acceptable to President Trump thus far. And keep in mind that the ceasefire, such as it is right now, that's been in effect since April the 7th, that ceasefire was supposed to involve an opening of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians did not come through on that. So I think there's some understandable reluctance on the American side to kind of have Lucy and the football played on them again with a promise of the opening of the Strait of Hormuz in return for other concessions, and then that opening not coming to pass. We seem to be caught in that loop right now. And the longer the Strait is closed, the more serious the economic consequences are going to be for the globe. And here in the United States, we had that long conversation about jet fuel and Spirit Airlines at the top of the show. You're going to see things like that proliferate, I think, leading to some concern in the administration that it's time to get this Strait open.
And I'm glad you mentioned the ceasefire because, of course, anytime you have any ceasefire, it's in a fragile state. I wonder how the latest sort of back and forth in the Strait could jeopardize that ceasefire.
Well, this is really a political decision for President Trump. I mean, you had a tremendous amount of stuff today shot here in the area of Fujairah. There was a South Korean ship at anchor off the coast there. You had, I saw a video online of a huge plume of smoke on the coast of the United Arab Emirates there. Other targets in the UAE hit. Obviously, a lot of action out in the Strait with American helicopters going after small boats. Is that a ceasefire? I mean, I think in the common accepted notion of the term, no. But sometimes in the Middle East, I will say you do get things that the parties agree to continue to call ceasefires while there's still some degree of shooting at each other. So where is the line in President Trump's head where he decides that actually it's too much? We're going back to full-scale hostilities. We're going to strike economic targets in Iran. If I had to speculate, I would say that's probably the death of an American or serious damage to American naval assets, none of which happened today.
All right. Well, in the coming days, we will not know, but I know you will be tracking it all, and we appreciate your time. Thank you, Aaron. The Supreme Court temporarily restored the ability to receive the widely used abortion drug mifepristone by mail. Justice Samuel Alito signed the order that puts on hold a lower court ruling until at least May 11th. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins me now. Jessica, tell me what this means, what Friday's lower court ruling through the Supreme Court's actions mean for women.
So what this means is, as of today, the FDA rule that's been in place since right after COVID started remains in place. What are we talking about? When COVID hit, the FDA essentially changed and or relaxed its regulations when it comes to obtaining mifepristone. You don't have to go in person. You can have a telehealth appointment. You can also get mifepristone through the mail. Those were temporary relaxations of the regulations that were put in place, and then they became permanent. Louisiana has since essentially tried to ban abortion in that state and has now challenged those regulations. That's the case that we're talking about, as you know. Louisiana has basically made two big arguments here. The first is that if women in Louisiana can have a telehealth appointment with somebody outside the state and get mifepristone mailed into the state, that undermines Louisiana's all but complete ban on abortion. The other argument that Louisiana is making, the other big legal argument, is that the FDA didn't go about relaxing this regulation in the right way. So you asked me, what happened on Friday? What happened on Friday is that the Fifth Circuit, the Court of Appeals that oversees Louisiana, essentially said, you know what, Louisiana, we think you're going to win. So we're going to temporarily suspend this FDA new regulation. What happened today? What happened today is the Supreme Court said, temporary timeout. Push pause on what the Fifth Circuit did. Let's take a moment and let's get arguments from both sides, and then we'll make a decision within probably about a week. And that's where we are right now. I know it sounds complicated, but that's where things stand at this moment.
I see. And Justice Alito is giving Louisiana until Thursday to respond. In addition to what you just laid out, what more do we expect from Louisiana as they make their case?
So, and I know that there's been some question about, oh, Justice Alito, he's the person who wrote the Dobbs decision, which of course said that there is not a constitutionally protected right to obtain an abortion. Has he changed his view? As you know, Justice Alito is the Supreme Court justice that oversees the Fifth Circuit. So he's just saying to his colleagues, okay, I'm giving you an administrative stay. That Fifth Circuit decision doesn't go into effect. The rule that we've had since COVID remains while we hear, as you said, from Louisiana. Louisiana is going to argue, again, that their abortion ban is essentially being undermined, and that this federal agency, the FDA, didn't go through the proper process when it said it is safe to have a telehealth appointment and get your mifepristone in the mail. We can expect that the drug companies will say the opposite. Mifepristone has been approved since 2000. The FDA dotted its I's and crossed its T's, and that it's entirely permissible for the FDA to do what it did. And then, of course, the question is, what does the Supreme Court do in the short and long term?
So, is it fair to say that at this point we shouldn't overread too much into what this means? Because it sounds like we're just buying more time to consider both sides.
Absolutely. We should not read anything into what Justice Alito did today. Again, implementing that administrative stay, other than it's literally a player on the field saying, timeout, I need a minute. This is not Justice Alito putting his thumb on the scale. It's not Justice Alito indicating where a conservative majority of the court is going. It's literally just a player saying, timeout for a minute.
Okay, Jessica, and when the game resumes, you'll be right in the middle of it. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come on the Takeout, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs the nation's latest gerrymandered congressional map into law, the redistricting state of play, and the effects it could have on the midterms. Also, a new poll finds President Trump's disapproval at an all-time high. Our political panel weighs in on that and much more. Plus, the marquee event in the world of fashion. Arrivals are already underway at the Met Gala. We'll bring you there live. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Between last week's Supreme Court ruling regarding Louisiana's congressional map and the recent bipartisan redistricting wars across the country, some lawmakers are calling for reforms on gerrymandering. Roland Fryer joins us now. He is an economics professor at Harvard and contributor to the Wall Street Journal. Roland, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you.
So I understand you've come up with a way to use math to solve gerrymandering. Talk to me about that formula.
Yeah, basically, I won't bore you with the details, but it asks how compact can you make a state's political districting plans, meaning trying to cluster people who live together into the same political district. It is, as you say, a mathematical way of thinking about gerrymandering, and it allows us to have an objective measure to understand when a state redraws the maps, how different it is from kind of an optimal way that the math says that a state should be drawn.
And how would this realistically change the way a state's congressional district looks?
Well, in many states, a tremendous amount. For example, Tennessee is one of the states with where it would have the biggest effect, but also New York, Louisiana, et cetera. And it's not just how they look on a map. The issue I'm worried about is not a liberal or conservative view. It's about democracy. When you draw the maps correctly, like you have up, then votes matter more. So, for example, when we did our analysis, when we redrew the maps in New York according to the mathematical formula, a 1% change in voters voting Democrat, for example, or Republican, switched to a 2.5% increase in the share of seats that party obtained. Now, under the way they were drawing the maps, it was 0.5%. So in other words, if you draw the maps according to objectivity and the math, you get 5 times more responsiveness. And responsiveness here means when the voters want to elect someone, the actual outcomes are more responsive to their preferences.
Well, there are concerns from both sides, as you very well know. After last week's Supreme Court decision of Louisiana's map that created a second minority-majority district, among those concerns are that these maps could dilute the voting power of minorities. How would your method protect against that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, District 6 in Louisiana, I follow that very carefully. The issue is allowing people to draw maps in a way that protects one constituency, allows that tool allows subjectivity in other dimensions as well. So it's a two-edged sword. What I believe is, look, the best way to do this is to just be objective and transparent and have a real metric that shows us here's what the most compact districting plans look like, and anything that deviates from that needs a true cost. Now, that's the math. There's a political decision, which is should people be able to draw maps that increase minority representation? That's a political question. What I know is when you do the math correctly, democracy flourishes.
And does that math also protect people who believe, that gerrymandering it could protect, say, a voter in rural Texas from having their vote diluted by people living in cities? In other words, is there really a way to protect all voters' interests without some level of political influence?
No, there's no free lunch. We have to make a decision on the trade-offs. And, we can say that the rural voters' vote is diluted by folks who live in the city because they're outnumbered. But what I can tell you is empirically, when you show, if you move away from the way the maps are drawn now to ones that are based on this objective measure, that responsiveness increases in some places as much as fivefold. And again, that means those voters' preferences matter more. So I can't speak to, it's really hard to design anything that's going to be perfect for every single individual voter in America. But what I can tell you is that overall, this is a much better and more democratic, in the sense of democracy, method.
And Roland, what about those who say, well, gerrymandering is just part of the political process now and that it doesn't need fixing?
Yeah, that's really dangerous. That scares me, because when you anything that you do that lowers the incentives to vote, meaning if my vote doesn't matter as much because I feel like the maps have been altered in such a way that no matter what happens, the same types of candidates are going to be elected, then, well, my incentive to vote goes down and I participate less in our democracy. So I think just, throwing our hands up in the air and say this is just part of politics, which I think both sides of the aisle have done now, I think that's really, really dangerous. What I think we need is we need to take a deep breath and remind ourselves of our founding principles, and create an objective measure that would truly increase the power of every vote.
Roland Fryer, thank you so much for your expertise and your time on this.
Of course, thank you.
As the House redistricting battle continues, Senate lawmakers are looking for ways to exert their influence on the balance of power. Republicans think they may have a path through John Fetterman. Our political panel is next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we're watching this evening. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is recovering after being hospitalized from pneumonia. According to a spokesperson, the 81-year-old was initially put on a respirator, but is now breathing on his own. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has written a letter to a federal judge requesting extradition to his home country, Mexico, saying he is fighting for, quote, equal treatment of the law. The drug kingpin has been in the U.S. since his extradition here in 2017 on drug trafficking charges. Mexico agreed to send him to the U.S. following his 2 escapes from maximum security prisons. This is the moment a United Airlines plane hit a tractor trailer and a light pole moments before landing at Newark Airport in New Jersey over the weekend. Despite the collision, the plane landed safely, thank goodness. The driver of the truck was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the crash. A new poll from ABC, The Washington Post, and Ipsos finds President Trump's approval rating is at an all-time low. 62% of Americans disapprove of President Trump. That's up 2% since February. Political panel time. Republican strategist Tiffany Smiley and Democratic strategist Amisha Cross are both with us at the table, and it's so great to see you. Tiffany, I want to start with you because these numbers are not good for President Trump. How should him and his team be reading them?
Yeah, it's not uncommon for a president at this moment in his term to have, disapproval ratings that are relatively high or the highest in the term. But let's remember that President Trump has only been in office for a year and 3 months. And the Biden-Harris administration really put us in a bad place on inflation. And I wish we could just flip a switch and turn it off and on, but that's just not how inflation works. President Trump got into office and he's been working day and night to lower costs for hardworking American families. So I'm a mom of 3 boys. I know that I used to walk out of the grocery store with 4 bags. Now I'm walking out with 2 bags and paying the same amount. Moms across the country know this. Prices are up. But I think we need to remember, and Republicans heading into the midterms need to be able to understand where the American people are and say, hey, it was bad. The Biden-Harris administration, put us in a really bad spot, but things are getting better. And President Trump is working to make things better. You think of the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. People are going to they're going to be getting more money in their pocket in the next few months. So good things are happening. Job reports are higher than expected. Unemployment rates are going down. Things are trending in the right direction. And President Trump, between now and the midterms is 6 months. That's a very, very long time in political terms.
It is. It's like right around the corner, but it's
That's
also
right.
a lifetime, right?
Yes.
Tiffany's right in that these low approval numbers are not new for a president heading into the first midterms after coming into office. But history has also shown us that when they are low, there's a consequence of losing seats in Congress. How do you think, Amisha, that Democrats are trying to capitalize on the president's performance in these 6 months?
Well, Democrats are speaking to Trump's policies that have caused a lot of the approval ratings we've seen tank. In large part, what we saw with his tariff strategy that actually increased prices for everyday Americans who were, just going to buy groceries for their kids. They have rerun several of his own personal quotes about needing this war and not having enough money for childcare because we have to be in this war. Americans writ large, whether they're red, blue, purple, or anywhere in between, are not fans of the war in Iran. They are not fans of the cost of it, the billions of dollars a day that it costs. They're also not fans of this president saying that affordability is a hoax. What we know is that prices have gone up. They've gone up significantly. Everywhere from the pump, which is part of the war, which is part of the equivalent of the war with Iran. We wouldn't have the prices at the pump if we hadn't have gone to war with Iran. But beyond that, it is the cost of groceries. It is healthcare expenses. It is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act did something extraordinary for Trump and his cronies. It put a lot of money in the pockets of already wealthy Americans. But the middle class is shrinking, and the impoverished class continues to grow. We've seen cuts to things like food stamps, where they kicked hundreds of thousands of people off, in addition to Medicaid. And Medicaid is not extended to those who really need it.
But I think, not necessarily kicking people off of the
people
program.
got kicked off the rolls who needed this to feed their families. What we know is the overwhelming majority of people who qualify for food stamps are people with young kids in the home. What we also know is that right now, the unemployment rate is still at a place it should not be. And yes, there have been increases, but those are low-wage jobs. Those are not the jobs that allow you to pay your rent and take care of your families. These are things that should be priorities for the president. He said this was a golden age of America. We're wondering when that golden age actually happens and who it's for.
And Tiffany, you just said 6 months is actually a lot of time to turn things around.
Yes.
What is your response here? How can he do that and get the message across that just give me a little more time, things will get better?
Yeah, I think he is doing that. You see him out on the campaign trail. He's going to be out, he said, as if he's running for president, because we know when Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket, people turn out and vote. That will be the challenge for Republicans, because he's not at the top of the ticket, and Republicans have a job or a gap to fill, really, in sharing with the American people that things are going to get better. A lot can happen in 6 months. Gas prices can come down considerably. Grocery prices can come down considerably within the next 6 months. And Democrats really are not in a good place either. They have progressive far-left candidates that they continue to back in their party. You have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, backing the new Senate candidate in Maine, Planter. And that's not going to sell broadly across the country to the American people. So Republicans have a challenge ahead of them, and they need to meet the challenge and make sure that they are sharing the message that things are going to get better.
I want to talk to you both about one Republican plan, because obviously the margins are tight. And Politico is reporting that some Republicans are trying to recruit Senator John Fetterman to switch parties, and that President Trump would offer an endorsement, even some financial backing. Fetterman has said he's not going to do this, but I wonder if that speaks broader to what does that say about the Democratic Party here and the Republicans' attempt to flip him?
Well, I think that the Republicans are trying to make this overture in large part because John Fetterman has given them votes in many cases. Are talking about in terms of getting some of the Senate appointees across, in terms of getting and ensuring that, you know, President Trump's OBBA bill passed. He has been someone who has stood by a lot of controversial conservative bills, much to the chagrin of those in the Democratic Party. But I don't see him changing his tune anytime soon, because it will water down his effect in large part. I think that he likes seeing himself as somewhat of an independent, of a maverick in this sense. He loses that if he goes Republican. Also, he would only be there as long as it takes them to replace him with an actual Republican. So it doesn't make sense in its calculus.
Yeah, I have long said that John Fetterman perhaps is the only moderate, common sense Democrat that Congress has today. He really cuts through to independents. He makes sense. You know, when you look at where he has aligned with Republicans, he's a strong supporter of Israel. He also was a strong supporter of immigration and securing our border. That's widely popular with people in Pennsylvania and the American people. But you have to wonder if there are perhaps more Democrats that actually align with him, but they just don't want to say the quiet part out loud. Because, I mean, the Democrats really alienate him and have been quite mean to him. I think they would be smart to partner with him and engage with him.
We will see if that happens. Thank you both for your time. I wish we had more of it. Tiffany Smiley and Amisha Cross, thanks for being here. Well, it's fashion's biggest night of the year. We'll take you live to the Met Gala and tell you who is and who is not attending this year and why. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Tonight, New York City is home to the biggest night in fashion, the annual Met Gala. This year's theme, Fashion is Art. CBS News New York's Allie Bauman is on the red carpet and joins us now. Allie, when I was at that station, this was one of my favorite assignments of the year. Tell us about the dress code for tonight and how are people interpreting the theme?
Yes, Luigi, it is my favorite night of the year as well, the best Monday of the year, some could say. So tonight's theme, as you said, is Fashion is Art, and it's really about the convergence of fashion and the dressed body, as they're calling it, with art history. They're saying that fashion is the one thing that really is the thread through every single collection in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And as you know, the Met Gala means the opening of the Costume Institute Spring Exhibition. So for the exhibition this year, they're going to be matching some of the fashion pieces with some of the art pieces that they have on display at the museum. Tonight we're seeing a lot of color on the Met Gala steps. We have people in, of course, very extravagant looks, and right now we have, I don't know if Chrissy can bring you over to Sam Smith with this feather headpiece and glitter about. So obviously extravagance and beauty and art, the theme of the night.
And Allie, the Met Gala and fashion also weaves itself through politics often. Tonight, Jeff Bezos is sponsoring the event. Is that looming over the night? Because we've already heard some criticism of that.
Yes, it is the first night that Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez are the honorary chairs of the evening. They funded both the Met Gala itself, as well as the new gallery that the Costume Institute is going to be housed in inside of the museum. So we don't know for sure if that's the reason that Mayor Zohran Mamdani will not be coming tonight. He is breaking with tradition, unlike his predecessors. He is not coming to tonight's evening. He said that he was focusing on affordability. If you can see now behind me, Sam Smith, that he's focusing on affordability, which is the opposite of the looks here. We have seen already some protests or symbols of protests throughout New York City. People have been plastering certain billboards with Jeff Bezos Met Gala, as well as even, leaving bottles and pieces of art, in a sense, to protest the Met Gala itself. Here, we have not seen acts of protest on the Met steps, but the night is young.
All right, Allie, well, that's all part of the night, and it's going to be a big one for you, so have a great time. Thank you, Allie Bauman. Coming up, Major Garrett will round out the show with his CBS News radio flashback. Today, a 1939 interview with baseball legend Babe Ruth. You're watching The Takeout.
Now for our CBS radio clip of fame. You know I love baseball. And if you love baseball, as I do, you must revere the Bambino. George Herman Babe Ruth was, until Shohei Ohtani came along, unquestionably the greatest baseball player ever, and it's not close. He was also, the Babe, a larger-than-life figure full of humor, wisecracks, and warmth. He also ate ravenously, drank heavily, and smoked as many as, believe it or not, pause, take this in, 20 cigars a day. Early in his career, the Babe was a stellar pitcher and later became the game's most feared, famous, and celebrated home run hitter. Here's the Babe with CBS in 1939.
Babe, you've had more publicity than the Prince of Wales. You like it?
Well, I'll tell you about that. I wouldn't be human if I didn't like sprawl write-ups for my home runs. But I don't like the papers to say that I see sick and crippled kids to get my name in the headlines. That's all wrong. I'm strong for the kids. I know them, and they know me. Publicity can't make a fellow smack the old apple or play good ball. If he does that, he'll get publicity anyway.
I saw a flock of autograph hunters around you the other day like flies around a sugar bowl. You must get a lot of writing practice.
I sure do. I put the old Hancock on everything they push in front of me except blank checks. Baseballs, books, gosh, everything. Someday I'll be signing socks.
No one but Shohei Ohtani today could even carry the Babe's socks. From baseball to something that goes with baseball, hot dogs and chili.
Do not want a nice, shiny stainless steel Ben's chili bowl.
That'd ruin everything, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
If it was all shiny and buffed up.
No, we don't want that.
The key part of that story, Ben's closed for 4 months for renovations, but the work took 9 months.
3, 2, 1, congratulations!
Ben's reopened Friday, and Virginia, affectionately known as Mama, saw the new Ben's Chili Bowl for the first time. Virginia Ali, the matriarch of Ben's at 93 years old, is seeing Ben's reach into the modern era of design and efficiency, while clinging happily to and celebrating passionately its gloried and storied past.
Let me get a whole line of staff.
The crowds lined up early Friday for half smokes, chili, burgers, fries, shakes, and a unifying atmosphere that has defined the iconic diner for nearly 70 years. Ben's has a history with politicians, some more prominent than others.
May 1st, 2026, Ben's Chili Bowl Day in the best city in the world.
The city's brass turned out in force to welcome Ben's back. We talked to Mama, that is Virginia, before Ben's reopened.
It became a gathering place back there many years ago. And I was so happy because we're all about the community. We're all about the people. And Washington is such a beautiful city.
You're going to be with everyone seeing it for the first time. You're not going to get a sneak peek.
No, they told me I'm not getting a sneak peek. Is that fair? I mean, I've been here, come August 22nd, it will be 68 years.
Right.
You think I shouldn't have a peek?
But we did. The new touches, the mural outside.
The ceiling tiles and all of that.
That's the original tin ceiling. Refurbished and painted. Now a gorgeous set of windows.
Now beautiful light. Right.
Beautiful light
Yes.
coming in. And the outside lighting working for the first time in decades. Ben's Chili Bowl back. Better, faster, and spicier than ever. I, for one, very happy about the spicier part. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.